We have now a special guest that's coming all the way from the United States of America. So Jason Fisher, let's give him a round of applause, and he's going to tell us more about that.
If you were to say drug problem, most people think about narcotics, illegal drugs, and obviously that is a big problem in any country around the world. But this is a problem that most people won't really immediately think about. I mean, if I sat there and I gave a raise of hands, of course I'm kind of telling you what the problem is on the screen, and I said, what's another drug problem? This would probably not be the one you think about, but it is a huge problem. And that is that, as you can see here, over 20% of the medications that are ever manufactured in the United States have to be destroyed. And predominantly it's because of what I'm going to show you here. A problem in the United States is once someone has received drugs and they don't get used for whatever reason, they have to be destroyed. And we're going to be talking about some of the most expensive drugs, but then it goes way down the chain to, we're not talking about aspirins, we're not talking about ibuprofens and the things that you take for a headache. We're talking about really exotic, expensive drugs here. So this guy with the happy face on right now is really the guy who came up with the idea of this. His name is Phil Baker, Dr. Phil. So affectionately in the States, Dr. Phil is, I don't know if you've ever seen TV shows, but this is another Dr. Phil. He started what's referred to as Good Shepherd Pharmacy. It is a non-profit charity pharmacy. He was a regular pharmacist in a regular pharmacy selling drugs like you would have here in Romania, prescription drugs. And he had so many people coming in that could not afford drugs. They would get a prescription, they would come in, and he'd say, well, your insurance is paying $80, your portion is $15. And they'd go, and they would not take their prescription. And so it's like, $15, really? You can't, this is gonna, and they'd be like, I'll get better in 4 days. And so they just would not take their medicine. Or they would start taking their medicine, they'd come in for a refill, and then they would be, so then they would just quit taking it. So he's like, I can figure out a way of doing this. So he said, I'm going to start a charity pharmacy, a non-profit pharmacy. We're never going to sell drugs. We're not going to take care of people who have insurance. Anyone that can come has to be uninsured or underinsured. And so he's been doing that for 5 years in the United States. And I've kind of come alongside him because it's a challenge, raising money, doing this, funding this, and it's a lot of hard work. He came up with a very interesting model, and he is the only nonprofit charity pharmacy in the United States that is actually break even. You can't make money in a nonprofit, but he can break even, which means that all of his expenses get covered and paid for, and he doesn't have to go out and get grant money to cover it. So what he did was this. Most people that don't have insurance, for whatever reason, will pay a membership fee, because a lot of these people that we're talking about here, they have a lot of drugs every month. They may be diabetic, they may be, and so every month they have to have the same drug. So they have a kidney, transplant. For the rest of your life, you're going to have to take a drug to not reject your kidney. So that for the rest of your life, you're going to be paying $150 a month or whatever for this kidney drug. And so what he did is he realized that the cost of these drugs is really hardly anything. So a drug that might cost $150, he can buy at like $1.50. So what he did was he set up a membership program and said, look, pay a membership fee and we'll take care of all your drugs. So he's been doing that for the longest time, but he was only receiving drugs that were donated from the manufacturers. So what was happening is manufacturers, when it's getting close to the expiration date, they would say, hey, we can get a tax write-off, we're going to give these away. And so that's what was happening. He was getting all these. So he's very dependent upon expiration dates getting close and manufacturers out of their goodwill giving him drugs to do this. And the really expensive drugs, the really life-saving drugs, were not in these programs. And yet he would have people that would come in with these drugs and say, hey, I know that if I give you these drugs, you're going to give it to someone that will need them and could use them. And he says, I can't take them. It's against the law. And so he was frustrated. Years of doing this. And so he worked in the state of Tennessee to get the law changed so that he could receive those drugs. He cannot sell them, so he can't take a $1,000 drug and get it donated to him and turn around and sell it. But he can give it away. And he got the law. There's one other state, Texas, how big Texas is. But Texas is huge. So if Texas had written this right, they would have solved America's problem, but they didn't. The law in Texas is someone in Texas can give drugs that can be given to someone in Texas. Great for Texas if you happen to be in Texas. Or you could go drive maybe, I guess, to Texas and maybe they don't check your information really carefully and you get your drugs. But who's going to go every month to Texas and get your drugs? Unless you happen to go to the border and you're just going to flip over. He got the law in Texas written so that he can receive drugs from any patient in any of the states, and he has to give it first and foremost to Tennessee patients, but if there's not a Tennessee patient that needs it, he can give it to anyone in any other state in the country. And so that is the quote loophole, but it's not really a loophole because it was written and designed that way. So that went into effect in September. So think about how fast this is moving. So I think it was right around the last time I came to Romania, which was 3 months ago. Right before I went, he's like, hey, let's go have lunch. I got all these blockchain ideas. He'd read a book, and he's not a tech guy. And so for the first hour and a half, he's sharing with me all these blockchain ideas about, hey, we can do this and this. I'm like, square peg, round hole. You can do a lot of things with blockchain, but you can also do that same thing in something else. And generally, that's better to do it in something else, unless it really makes sense that blockchain is going to solve something that you couldn't have done in just a regular database or something else like that. So then I was ready to pay the check and get up and say, hey, see you when I get back. And he said, I got one more. I'm like, okay. So I sat down. I'd already paid for the check, and he starts sharing with me what I'm going to share with you now. And I'm like, wow, that's a game changer. You are going to single-handedly solve this problem with that. And he's like, really? Because he thought it was like the least important of the 5 options that he was presenting to me that day. So, what's the problem and how are we going to do this? So, this is actually pretty old. I think the date on this was like 2007. So these are all the states in the United States where you can give medicine back that has been donated to you. And you can see it's a really small list of people. And then when you start thinking about cancer drugs, it gets to even a smaller list of things up there on the sheet. So the law that he got passed usurps and goes over all those laws. Does that make sense? Because the state of California could not restrict someone in California giving something away. Does that make sense? California has no right to say to its citizens, you can't give something away. Now, they could say to someone, you can't receive something, that like medicine or whatever. So this is how big the problem is. Over here on the side, it says nearly $2 billion in prescription drugs are wasted every year. Over here, medication waste costs in the United States, $418 billion. Notice that's a pretty big difference. There's a difference of a pretty significant magnitude of $2 billion and $418 billion. What I say by that is nobody really knows how big this problem is. Nobody has really tracked this problem because who made that $418 billion? Drug companies. Do they really want people to track how much it's wasted? Because that went into someone's pocket. Okay? And over here, cancer drugs is $3 billion. So it's a big problem. And we're just talking about US numbers. And it's not just a financial problem. Those were financial numbers. I'm going to read this for you. So the first chart over there says 1 in every 3 water samples taken in the United States contains hormones from pharmaceuticals. They can track that. You can go test the water in the United States, and 1 out of every 3 samples, they can trace back to having something in it that was, and obviously came from pharmaceuticals. I don't know what it would be in Romania, but I got to think that this is a global problem. This second one's a very interesting stat. And so every pound of medicine that we redistribute, which means that we take it in and we give it to someone else, prevents 30,000 pounds of waste from the production of the medicine. Because you don't just make an ounce of medicine from an ounce of product. Okay? It's a significant amount of waste in actually creating something. 70% of the waterways in the United States, the drinking water, and this was 25 states that they traced this, had 1 or more pharmaceuticals in it. So you're just drinking it. So, and the medical waste incinerators in America third largest source of dioxins, which is a highly toxic pollutant. So basically, when they actually do not let it get in the water supply, but they actually incinerate it, it goes up into the atmosphere and comes down, and guess what? It didn't rain. And all of a sudden, one of the highest toxins in the United States has been traced to the destruction of the pharmaceuticals. I'm gonna tell you some numbers, because I don't have actually a good picture of this. In the United States, the state of Colorado is really the only state that tracked this. They tracked and said that there were 170 tons of drugs that were destroyed the year 2016. Now, 2017 numbers haven't come out, or maybe they don't want them to come out, don't know. But that's the only state that actually at one point in time said, you know what, we're going to track this. So all the nursing homes and hospitals and everyone else that was taking these drugs and actually incinerating and destroying them properly. So that's 170 tons of drugs that actually get destroyed properly. Because if you actually went to the hospital and said, hey, what do I do with this? The person at the front desk would say, well, you can send it to this address here, and they're going to charge you $10 to destroy that, or you can just throw it down the toilet. Most persons are going to say, okay, pay $10 to get these drugs destroyed, or throw it down the toilet. I'm going to just throw it down the toilet. So it's got to be significantly more than 170 tons. I mean, can you think about a little pill? How many of that has to be done to create 170 tons, and that's in one state? And that state isn't California. That state's not Texas or Florida, one of the big states. So it's a huge problem. So why? Why don't we just make a decision that we're going to fix this and do this? Well, because once these prescriptions get prescribed, they can't re-enter the custody chain. There's got to be a chain of custody here to show that it went from this manufacturer, it was manufactured on this date, this is the expiration date, this is the lot number, it went from this manufacturer to this distributor went to this pharmacy issued it to this prescription to this patient on this particular day, etc. All of a sudden, it's gone. It's like in somebody's closet now, and now it gets back to you. There's not a chain of custody that's been done there. Second, some states have recycling programs. However, those programs only accept donations from hospitals, not individual patients. So we do have, and I think I just showed you that chart of some of those states. Those states would say that if the drugs went to a hospital and they got sent to a hospital, then a hospital could reclaim those back, because the idea is that it's been in a locked closet or something else like that, and it could be represcribed. And so, but think about it. Most states don't even allow you to do that in the United States. And certainly nobody in the United States lets it go to in the hands of an individual patient and then reclaim those back. And every program has been siloed within their individual states, and there is absolutely no national network. Now, hopefully some of you guys that know blockchain sit there and go, ching, I know how blockchain can fix that. So what's the solution? We're going to design a blockchain ecosystem that ensures the safety of all those prescription donations. We're going to safely and effectively distribute those to the most vulnerable patients, and we're going to properly destroy all medication that cannot be salvaged. So, how's that working? So, there's going to be a chain in the middle of all this. That'll be a blockchain. Donors will, we can't incent people. So the other wonderful thing about this is we're going to start with chemo meds. And I'm going to, these numbers are going to stagger you. So the top 20 chemo meds in the United States cost between $36,000 a month and $12,000 a month. So if you are insured and you have really good insurance, then the insurance company will pay 90% of that, which means if it's a $36,000 drug, then you only have to pay $3,600 a month for your medication. If you happen to have 80%, which is what most people do, then you got to come up with $7,200 for your medication every month. So think about what happens here. You and all your immediate family are basically mortgaging their house to pay for your cancer drugs, and then your doctor says this one's not working for you. We need to move you over to this other drug, and you're sitting there saying, well, what do I do with these 45 pills that cost me $3,000 a piece? And he's like, oh, you got to throw those down the toilet. Really? There's nobody else that can use this because they're perfectly good and they're not going to expire for like 3 more years. And they're like, yeah, that's the law. And so and sometimes, and it happens a lot because these are cancer drugs, people pass away. So you've gotten these drugs and you've got 45 more pills, and your mother passed away and you're like, I sure wish someone else could use this because I know how much we had to spend on these cancer meds. So it is not a stretch to think that there are probably a lot of people in the United States that would really like to give these drugs back, okay? And then we have the recipients. They're going to have to be on a waiting list because we can't guarantee supply. Unlike manufacturers that we can predict how much is needed to be able to do this, I can't predict that next month we're going to be given X amount of drugs. So this is all purely on a waiting list program. And it's got to be a first come, first served. So let's say this, the state of Tennessee, if you know blockchain, I know not everybody understands blockchain really well in here, but one of the great things about a blockchain is it's a public-private ledger. Whatever you want, you can decide to make public. Whatever you want, you can decide to make private, and it's immutable, and you can go out there and you can custom design anything you want to be essentially recorded. There's a lot of security related to this. I don't think you want your grandmother's illness to be on a public blockchain, okay? But when your mother needs this med, and it will cost a lot of money to be on a waiting list, and to see that you came on the waiting list before someone else, you can see what medicines that you need, and oh, you know what, they changed medicine, so we take that one off, but this one's coming on, and we did. All of this can be done great on a ledger. Compare it to transplants. The transplant industry is rife with corruption. If you need a kidney and your doctor is really well connected and you have lots of money, then amazingly you get your kidney. If you're not, then you may not get your kidney. There's no way of tracking that. Okay? There is no, this person died, the serial number on his kidney is this, his expiration date is this, his age is this, his blood type is this. It's a matter of trust that the network is working well. That's another thing. I think someone else could sometime maybe fix a blockchain for transplants, but we're not going to tackle that one now. This one's great because everything that gets produced has a code on it. We know that when the medicine comes in by state law, we have got to give first priority to an uninsured person. That's what the law says. If you have no insurance, you're at the top of the list. If nobody is uninsured, then we can go down the list to underinsured. Again, based upon a waiting list, that's a ledger, okay? Not with your name on it, but a private ledger that we can figure out who your ID is, and you can look and see where you are on the ledger. And then down the road, we would have the ability for doctors to see if they got a patient that's there, to see if their patient, if there is meds that are available for their patient. And so hopefully you know enough about blockchain to see how that can fix it. So this is an interesting question. We launched 2 weeks ago. What would you say the dollar value of that little box of drugs is there? Some of my guys know what this is because I've already told them this, so don't answer if you know. Just blurt out an answer. 150. Okay. Am I going to go any other? Anyone want to go higher, lower? Huh? 10,000?
Pharmacy value?
The value of what it costs. I mean, the insurance. Someone's paying for this drug, whether it's the insurance company or the person. Someone's got to pay for this. Not the manufacturer cost. This is what someone's going to have to pay. If you owe 10%, you're going to pay 10% of this, and the insurance company's going to pay the other 90%.
Given the figures you told us about, I think it's around 1 million.
Not well. Okay, easy there. It's about $225,000 of drugs in that little box that is there. If you can see, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drugs. That is there. About a 30-day supply of those drugs. So, and this came in with no press. This came in because just through the grapevine, people heard we were doing this, and they were waiting till we got the law passed that we could actually receive those drugs. So now I'm gonna open up for some questions here in a minute, but now kind of putting the startup hat on. How do you launch a program like this? This is a nonprofit. I mean, I can make no money on this. None of us can make any money on this. We got to give this away. And the way that we're gonna do this is so FedEx. Do you guys have Giving Tuesday here? I think it's pretty much a global phenomenon now. Global Giving Tuesday. Okay, so after you got Black Friday, which is where everybody spends a bunch of money on themselves, and then you have Cyber Monday, which again everybody spends a lot of money on themselves. So they go to the store to spend money on themselves Friday. They go online and spend money on themselves Monday. And Giving Tuesday is, okay, I've spent enough money on all my family and I've spent enough money on me, I'm going to give back on Tuesday. And so it's called Giving Tuesday. And so
I don't have that.
y'all don't have that yet, okay?
I don't have enough money to buy a stuff.
So Giving Tuesday is a phenomenon, and a lot of companies in the U.S. encourage their employees to be thinking about Giving Tuesday and doing whatever. FedEx is Memphis. I'm Memphis. Phil is Memphis, and I don't know if this is going to happen this fast or not, but FedEx came to us last week. I speak at a bunch of blockchain things now. Everybody wants us, me or Phil or one of us, to speak now to do things. Consensus, if you're in the blockchain community, you know who Consensus is. Consensus asked us to come to DC to launch their Consensus Health. Consensus wants us on the Ethereum platform, of course. IBM wants us on the Hyperledger platform, of course. Microsoft wants us on the Microsoft platform, of course. GoChain, which is, like we're way down on the thing, they want us on their chain because they're building a health chain platform. Everybody wants this on their blockchain. So it's kind of a really interesting phenomenon because I'm just saying, well, or we could just go out and do it ourselves and create the Remedy chain blockchain, go grab the Ethereum code and do it yourself. So FedEx came to us at the conference and they said, look, you're Memphis, we're Memphis, we got to figure this out. So one of the big challenges is getting the meds to Memphis. Do you know where the hub is in the United States for FedEx? Memphis. More cargo moves through Memphis than any other city in the world. And it's because FedEx is the FedEx hub of all this. So anytime you ship anything in the United States, it's probably going to go back to Memphis before it goes somewhere else every night. So, and there's a FedEx Kinko's in all over every city across America. So I hope that it happens this way. FedEx has no reason to not do this, but the thing is, it's a big company, and can they move this fast by literally a week from Tuesday to make a national program where they basically say to the nation, if you want to get back, we'll cover the drug costs to get back to Memphis. And so anyone could just go to any FedEx Kinko's, drop off their drugs, and ship it back to Memphis at no cost. That would be a game changer. But I don't think someone is not going to send $200,000 worth of drugs because it costs $6 to send the package. I mean, if you're going to do this, you're going to want to do this to help someone else. And the cost of the shipping is really not the issue, except that if FedEx were to get on national TV and NBC and say, this is what you can do on Giving Tuesday, you can do this as far as a give back, and I think that the floodgates would open, and so for us in that regard. And so that's Rummy Chain, and that's what we're doing, and I'm open for questions.
So, questions? If not,
I'll be here late, so we can talk one-on-one. But
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you think insurance companies would push back against this? Like, say, hey, we paid for part of this drug. It's yours to use, but not yours to give.
If they were selling it to us, and they would have a big issue. Yeah, like we spent X amount of money for this drug. Now you're going to make profit off of it, but we're not. And the great thing about this is, I cannot think of a scenario where any major company would go against what we're doing, because think of the blowback on them. You're a pharmaceutical company, you make a major drug, and it's going to get destroyed and go into the environment, or it could go in the hand of someone who's uninsured who would not be able to pay for it anyway. And why in the world would you go against that and risk the blowback in the United States from the bad press you get as far as being the bad guy in that scenario? In any scenario like that, whether it's the insurance company or anyone else, so the EPA, they're on board. They saw this and hey, they're great because EPA, they don't want these toxins in the environment. But the FDA, all these abbreviations, EPA is Environmental Protection Agency, they like this. The FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, they got scared to death. They're like, hey, you're taking these drugs and it went into these patients' hands. They really didn't read the law in the state of Tennessee. We are only able to receive capsules and tablets that are oral, and they have to be in the original packaging. If you get a $36,000 drug, like any of these, you can see here, these are, I'm not sure about that one. If you open that up, I think what you're going to see inside is not individual tablets by any stretch. You're going to see individual packets, and each one of those packets has got a serial number and an EDC code on it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to receive it. So it's got to be in the original packaging, unadulterated, and a pharmacist has to get it and validate it that it is in the original packaging. So when you spend this kind of money on these drugs, these things got like holographic signature things and stuff like that, and you got to look it up in a database to make sure that is the correct everything else. So, and then you also think, why in the world would someone counterfeit a $36,000 drug to give it away? There's absolutely no financial reason why someone would spend the money to counterfeit something that would be done that way. And at the end of the day, if your life is dependent upon something that has been donated, then you either decide to take it or not. So we've kind of felt through every ramification, and I can't think of anybody that would ever sue us or anything else. And so the one that was the hardest one, honestly, was as soon as the FDA heard about this, we got a call the next day. And we think they're going to blow the whole thing up. They're going to prevent us from doing it. They're going to call the state of Tennessee saying, I know you passed a law, but we're not going to let you do this because we're the federal government. And so when the FDA said, okay, they wouldn't go so far as to say they gave us our blessing, but they said they can't do anything about it. Then that opened up. California, so this could be on the thing. I don't care if Apple hears this. Apple wouldn't let us launch the app. So right now we got an Android app, and we actually had to make the website so that it works really well like an app if you access it on the phone, so that you can sign it, because we have to get their signature and all the rest of it would work really nice in an app. We got the app done, launched it, and guess what? Apple said, you can't do that in the state of California. We're in the state of Tennessee. You can't tell us what to do in the state of Tennessee. And they're like, well, you're not going to publish the app because it doesn't, we can't do this in the state of California. It just floored me. And so, I'm looking forward to NBC News coming and then say, well, what can we do on this? So, if you've got an Android device, you can do this, and if you got it to the web. But if you're an Apple user, well, Apple has said that they don't want to support this program. I got a feeling that the next day we'll get a phone call from Apple because they do not want that database. So I came to Romania in 1995 and started Cornerstone Technologies. We're one of the founders of Honest. I was a programmer for early days. I got a degree in electrical engineering, computer science. I learned Java in 1995, which is the year it came out. I started programming, and I quickly figured out that I cannot be managing a half a dozen projects and all these programmers and be writing code. And so I am not a very good coder anymore. I do look at a lot of code, and I do understand the technology behind this, but I also try to surround myself with people that are now a lot smarter than me and all these things. So one of the reasons actually for doing this, I said to Radu, is I want to really find a lot of blockchain guys in Romania. I've always kind of taken Romania's horn here, which is fine. Long story short, when I first came to Romania, I saw phenomenal engineers here in Romania. At the engineering of Polytechnic, my first business partner in Romania was Dr. Tranda from Moisha, who was the former dean of the Polytechnic Computer Science Department here in Romania. And just fell in love with the country. I lived here for a couple of years. We started Cornerstone way back in the day, and I've built a bunch of software companies over the years. And long story short, I could not write Solidity code if my life depended upon it, unless I probably got the book beside me, and I could probably do it. But I do read a lot, and so I do understand what the technology can do. So from a high level, I'm really more. We all can't be experts on everything, and especially you think about this. You can't be a subject expert on blockchain and Android and iOS and MongoDB and AI, and you got to have to pick things that you are going to be an expert on. God just blessed me. I do a lot of startups, and I see things and I see how we can use technology to solve things like this, and so that's kind of my niche. But I'm not. Most of you guys are better programmers than me. Yeah.
A question. For the blockchain project, for my opinion, is important adoption about the project, because could be created a distribution of the consensus of the activity. In your opinion, what is the unique value proposition of this project in this industry? Because I see a lot of chain about the medical activity. For example, in Switzerland there is medical chain for data privacy in medical. But in a lot of projects that I see in the world, I'd like to identify what is the unique value proposition for the project, because this is the real application for the person and the adoption for the industry.
Yeah. So, great question. So, the reason there really isn't a America solution on blockchain for healthcare is because the healthcare record is very sacred in America, and the patient has the right to control all their data, which I think there's EU laws that are similar over here in the States. I don't really need to worry about the patient record. You see, I'm not going to ever store, my record is a drug. It's a serial numbered item, it's an expiration date, it's all the rest of that information. And if someone is on the waiting list, they'll have a key, but that key will not be tied to their medical record. It'll just be them and their security key saying, that's my place in line. I just put my place in line and I'm the one that holds the key to that place in line. And I don't really know who the person is behind that place in line. Their doctor would know, they could see it, they could know. If they lose it, they lose their place in line, at which point they jump back in line again. Like you see, so this is a perfect solution for the blockchain because it is a public ledger with information that we're going to decide to make public, but then other information that we're going to keep private behind the scenes as well. And those are the best solutions. Is when you need to have a solution that you allow transparency, because you really do want the world to see what's going on. I want to be completely transparent to say, people, look, the law says that if you are a Tennessee resident who's uninsured, you have first priority because we passed the law. Okay, you want to. If California were to pass that law, then they could be on the blockchain. They could add their record, and the person from California would have first dibs from medication donated in California. So that's the beauty of the blockchain, is it's public, and everyone can see that we're doing what we are saying we're going to do. Now, we don't have to be even the repository for the drugs. Does that make sense? We're going to just build the blockchain, and I would love to have 20 nonprofit pharmacies across America that collect drugs, store the information on the drugs, so that anyone in any of the other states could do it. So we might be the first mover, and that's often kept in any startup. You're first mover. Well, I've told someone else, I think we got a 3-year head start. You know why? Because if someone saw what we were doing tomorrow and said, that's great, we want to do that in our state, there's no way they're going to get their senators and their congressmen and their attorneys and everyone else to draft a law, get that through the houses, get that passed, and then once it's passed, it took us like 6 months to get the paperwork, from it as well, because you've done something new and government doesn't work any faster in the States than it does here in Romania or any other country in the world. It's just a bunch of politicians that go on break and then they come back and what's the next thing I'm going to work on? So if the law doesn't allow them to do this with the drugs, they can't do it. I would love for 50 states to have their own program. Great. It's just 1/50th of $700 billion worth of drugs that's going back in, and we fixed America's other drug problem. But in the meantime, we're going to run it all through Memphis because the law in the state of Tennessee allows us to do that. So, I want anyone else in any other state to know that their place in line is just as important. But the problem is, if someone in Tennessee jumps in, I have to, by law, give it to them first. But if you think about it, if we get all the states to be given their medicine, we will not have enough patients in Tennessee to take all that medicine, so we'll have to give it to other people in other states. You see? And the blockchain will prove that we're doing it correct to anyone that's out there. Make sense? If you really understand blockchain, you could probably see those 3 problems that I did, and you're like, whoa, that's blockchain fixes every one of those. And that's what I did when he mentioned those things. I'm like, well, okay, that's it. A lot of people are chasing blockchain because it's cool. There's a lot of money in building blockchain and all the rest of this stuff. But you look at it and you're like, well, you could have done that with an Excel file, stored on Dropbox. I mean, you didn't really solve anything because you decided to use blockchain, other than you're going to go out and raise a bunch of money because you can put blockchain in the name of your company. This one could not have been solved without blockchain. This one came and the law got passed just at the right time that blockchain was coming of age. So.
Basically, who validates? So let's say, from my understanding, that the patient that is on the list to receive some sort of medication is represented by a key.
Mm-hmm.
Who validates that key? The doctor. Who validates that the person should be receiving a certain medicine?
Yeah. So if you think about it, a pharmacy does have your information because you cannot get it without a prescription. Okay. So a person will give their prescription to the pharmacy, which right now is just us. It could be any other pharmacy as well. St. Jude, are you guys familiar with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital? A lot of people know about it. St. Jude is the largest children's cancer hospital in the world, and it's for free. If you are a child and have cancer, then you can come to the States and they take care of you for free. Travel, anything. So we serve kids from around the world that come in. Because they're in Tennessee, they have access to the program. I could see, even though they haven't said yes, they could be a dispensary with their own pharmacy, and I suspect that they will. There's no reason for them not to have access to free meds. So anyone would do that, but then St. Jude would keep track of in their own private database because they're responsible for keeping the confidentiality of your health record in their own pharmacy system, and that's where it's known. Does that make sense? And all it is on ours is a ledger item to show that patient ID is this. That's it. So we don't need to ever know that, and we never would want to know that. We just know when we see in the ledger that someone, and so it will be, the public part of it would be that someone at St. Jude is getting this medicine. Because we have to store the chain of custody, which means that it went from this pharmacy to that pharmacy, at which point, if you really want to know who got it, you got to go to St. Jude and ask them for the information confidentially. That's a great question.
Okay, so I'm a patient, and I go to St. Jude. What do I show my app with my ID? Or what do I show to the pharmacy?
Well, it's got to start with a prescription. So that's the key. So the prescription.
How do you validate?
Okay, so it's a waiting list. Waiting list doesn't make you guarantee that you're getting anything. At which point in time you've given us the information, okay? Because we're holding a waiting list, and we're going to have to keep that confidential, all right? Because at which point we notify St. Jude that there is medicine available to fulfill a prescription. At which point they say you don't have a prescription. We say okay, we'll take you off the list, and the next person in line gets that. Makes sense? So we're a pharmacy. And if another pharmacy needs the drugs at our pharmacy, then we can give it to another pharmacy, but we couldn't give it to you. The pharmacy's job would be to make sure that you actually have a valid prescription to receive those medicines.
So you're in line, you get to the top of the line, you're first in line, right?
Uh-huh.
So you go to the pharmacy and then what happens?
No, it wouldn't be. So you would get to the top of the line. You'd be able to see where you are on the line, at which point now we would say, okay, you're next in line. We notify St. Jude and say, patient X here, and this is their information, has said that they need those medicines. They would notify you at which point in time. But if St. Jude says to us, they're not our patient, or they're no longer on that drug, which could happen because they've moved from one to another, at which point we just, boom, St. Jude has said they don't need it anymore, next guy on the list.
So you provide the information basically to the pharmacy?
We have, yes, because right now we're the only pharmacy with a waiting list. If every other St. Jude would have a waiting list. Ideally, you see, anyone can be kind of the private part of this whole thing. But right now, day one, it's just us. So St. Jude, in my vision, anyone else like that, any other clinic could create a waiting list on their own to keep track of that, and then they put that on Ledger because we don't want to be like the gatekeeper and say this is our thing. It's to make this work. It's going to be like a public blockchain. It'll be a consensus of a bunch of nodes. So St. Jude have a node. We have a node. Anyone else wants to do this have a node, and they keep some private information. They keep some public information. We will day one have to keep a lot of private information. There's nobody else out there that is going to keep this repository other than us. So yeah, good question. I was thinking.
I don't think you have a mechanism for avoiding the exploitation of this system. Some pharmacy to just register requests and use the drugs on the black market. I don't see somebody to control those.
Well, it's mandated by the state. For one, you can't just set up a pharmacy in the United States. I mean, it's there's law, and so, and I don't think that we're gonna. I mean, I do see pharmacias all over the place here in Romania, and they're not like that in the States. I mean, you don't have the corner pharmacy like we have here, and so there is a problem. It could be we're not doing opioids. So we're not doing any of the category of drugs that are tracked, like opioids and things like that. So these are not drugs that would be used because they're not painkillers. They're not this. These are chemo meds. You know, the only reason you would take this because your hair is going to fall out or this or that. I mean, there's not like an illegal market for this kind of stuff. Now, if we were to really knock it out of the park and get lots of medicine, one of the things we're talking about is how do we get that into other countries? And that'll be other laws that have to be done because now we'd have to look out there and say to any other country and say, look, this is we're actually having to destroy this medicine because we're taking care of all of our own people now. And does anyone else want us to give it to their country before we destroy it in our own considerations? At which point, any country that raises their hand and does that would be a great problem to have, which is how to get those medicines to them before they expire overseas. But I want to see how that, because the pharmacy industry is already so heavily regulated, you couldn't just be a pharmacy and create fake prescriptions to query our system to get chemo meds. You know, you'd have to have so many in the cahoots people, and I don't think we would do that. I also don't think that because this is a non-profit charity work like this, I don't think there would be any financial incentive for someone to be into doing that because it can never be sellable.
Actually, I think that pharmacies are working for my food. And,
right. There's no money in this. Yeah.
But by participating to this, we will not have those monies for the people that will buy it.
Someone who has insurance can't get these drugs. So that's the unique thing here. So we're not preventing the manufacturers from selling lots of these drugs. Okay? In fact, the more of that goes out, the more of that we're going to reclaim. Would be the interesting phenomenon of that. But if we get a donated medicine to us, it has to go into the hands of someone who does not have insurance. That isn't someone that would have paid a pharmacy $36,000. Someone who doesn't have insurance doesn't have to pay $36,000 a year, let alone $3,600 to pay for 1 month subscription of an insurance. So it's not lost revenue for the pharmacy. It's never would have received revenue for the pharmacy. And keep in mind, so a lot of these, there's another interesting phenomenon. A lot of hospitals and clinics have pharmacies associated. So we're talking St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. It's a hospital, but they have a pharmacy inside the hospital, okay? And you probably have the same thing here where in your hospitals, you can't just go down to the corner pharmacy and get these kind of drugs. Okay, these are chemo drugs, and I'm sure here in Romania too, you don't go down here and get your cancer drugs at the neighborhood pharmacy. They come through a hospital. And so you're not gonna really trick the system because of that. Now we keep going down market, and we start getting into anti-nausea drugs, which are more like $500 to $800 drugs. Then that's still a lot of money for someone who doesn't have insurance. But there's a big difference between a $500 drug and a $36,000 drug, and we're not going to tackle that hard today. Focus on the ones that are expensive.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason.